All right, everybody, welcome to the 2011 StarCraft 2 Art and Tech panel. Thanks for coming. My name is Alan Dilling. I'm the lead artist on StarCraft 2, and today we're going to show you some cool stuff we've been working on over the last year for Heart of the Swarm. First, I'll introduce you to our cool panel. We have Steve Provost, one of the next generation of younger artists at Blizzard. He's already made his mark. Basically, all the crazy, gooey, bloody deaths you've seen in the game, it's all his handiwork. Next, we have Dominic Filion, our lead graphics engineer. He's the smart one out of the group. He's the one to make sure the engine can handle all the cool art we put into it. And lastly, we have Phil Gonzalez.
Hello, Blizzard Convention.
Phil's a veteran on the team. He's been here for quite a while, and basically every unit, multiplayer campaign goes through his sweet, lovely hands. All right, so first we're going to talk a little bit about the art style of Blizzard, just to kind of catch you up on our philosophy. We work really hard, we're very passionate about everything, and we want to play in these worlds as much as you guys do. So we work really hard trying to come up with epic ideas. This is really the start of it, like the core concept of what makes a unit cool, what makes the universe cool, what adds to the game itself besides just the gameplay mechanics. The next one is bold shapes. You really need to have a unique silhouette, especially in an RTS when you have a top-down view. It's really hard to see the units. You know, there's 300 Zerglings on screen all over the place. You got to be able to pick out the infester. So having a unique, bold shape that really shows off the unit well is really important. And of course, crisp and colorful textures. You know, we're known for not doing realistic stuff. It's a little more on the flavorful side. You know, lots of color, and again, with the crispness, you can't get too much detail since the units are smaller, because when you zoom out again to the RTS view, it gets kind of busy, so you really need to kind of complement the bold shapes with details, but you can't get too much small stuff in there. And of course, to bring it to life, dynamic animations. Again, you're not going to see like uber realistic motion capture stuff with our animations. We like to do it by hand, keep it kind of stylized, a little bit over the top, and just basically have fun with it. So now on to the multiplayer units. I don't know if you guys have seen them on the floor out there, but we have a bunch of new units for all three sides, now with 5,000% more super badassness. And some of these units are still a work in progress, but I'm really proud of what we have so far on the art and design side. We've been playing The Office, we've had a lot of fun. The art looks amazing, these guys have done a great job. And it's kind of a fun thing too, because we work hand in hand with the designers. Sometimes we get certain things from them that say, hey, we need a small unit, and it's got a grappling hook, and it flies. We're like, okay, cool, and we'll kind of go off, we'll start pushing it more, like, what if it has 2 grappling hooks, or it's got laser grappling hooks, or, you know, instead of flying, it's got, you know, giant legs, and we kind of try and push it back and forth a little bit. Other times, we actually get stuff in that just seems cool to us, and we're like, hey, like, we want a giant robot in the game. Like, the Thor is a great example. We went to the designers and they said, hey, you know, giant robot, it's got huge guns. Like, they're like, what does it do? I don't know. You guys figure it out. It's just cool. Like, who doesn't like giant robots? So that's a good unit. That's a good example of basically them putting in cool stuff on our side and making it work in the game really well on the mechanics side. And actually, some of the stuff you're seeing here today, the design came in recently, so some of the stuff we made literally like 3 weeks ago. In fact, last week we were still doing some tweaks, so it's really fresh. All right, first we'll start off with the Zerg. Heart of the Swarm is a Zerg-centric expansion, and one of the new units is actually called the Viper. Now this is about 3 years old actually. It's a development video we had internally. We really wanted to have a cool snake-like motion for one of the characters. And again, we didn't know what for. We said, hey, that's a cool concept for Zerg. And so we animated this guy, we put him in, we were playing around with it, and it came down to, we just didn't have the tech to really pull it off so it'd be dynamic when it moved around in the level. And so we said, okay, we put it on the shelf and we'll come back to it, and you know, luckily a couple years later, we get to put it back in. And so we started reconcepting the overall look of it. And you can see Sammy, our art director, drew this, and at the beginning, it was a little more of a kind of a scorpion look, kind of a muta tail in there. More concepting, kind of flesh out the colors and some of the details. You see the changes in the head and the arms. And then you have the final model, which looks amazing, I think. And you're not going to see it animated here. I'll show you in a minute because it's dynamically animated, but this guy is the epitome of a cool, creepy Zerg. Like, you don't even want to click on it. It's so disgusting. And that's what we strive for, basically. Here's a couple of them in motion. You can see how their tails work, and when you click around and do 360s with them, they'll actually follows you perfectly. And of course, a lovely environment from part of the campaign. Little sneak peek. Next, we have the Swarm Host. This guy's really cool. Again, an older concept here. At the beginning, we weren't sure if he was going to be a flyer or if he was going to be on the ground, so we kind of just went with either concept. He ended up being a ground-based unit. And you can see here he's got a very distinct silhouette. Again, really strong shapes. He stands out against everything else in the game with that huge pad on his back and the egg sacs. A very structured, thick kind of dinosaur build for his motion, because as you'll see here, he's kind of a slow mover. And you see they come in, basically they burrow and they unleash these little critters called locusts, and they just tear up your bases. So Terran players are going to hate them. Next we have the Terran. Any Terran fans in the audience? See, they're just OP. You guys are just cheesy. Come on. All right, the first unit actually is a revisit of an older unit, the Hellion. So you can see we changed it up a little bit. It's got a new paint job on it, got some flames. And then, I don't know, by the way, it turns into a robot, which is super cool. Again, we can tell we like robots. This guy, again, strong shape. He's got the turret on top. When he transforms in this mode, it's almost like a siege mode. He's a little bit slower. He's tougher, though, and he's got a shorter range on his flamethrowers. And he's got those awesome shields on his arms that help deflect the damage. Here's some in the base transforming. And basically, this is the last thing a Zerg player sees before they GG. Here we have the Warhound. Again, more robots. Some of the themes of the new Terran units are a little more high-tech than some of the older, kind of more junky stuff. Here's a great picture of everything you love about Terrans. It's got fire, it's got a huge cannon, rocket missiles, laser explosions, and of course, a pig decal on the shield. Gotta have that. Here's the actual model, looking amazing. And again, we try to get a unique silhouette. We have sharp angles that try and get all the specular highlights in the model. The guys did a great job texturing this one. Here's a group of them, totally decimating some Protoss. And again, these units are all playable on the floor, so I encourage you guys later on to stand in the hopefully short line and test them out yourself. And last, for the Terrans, we have the Shredder. This guy, again, this is another kind of like a napkin concept. Sometimes we have high detailed concepts like you saw in the Warhound. Sometimes we just need a very simple, quick idea, and then we kind of hand it off to the modeler and the texture, and they kind of run with it, kind of add their own flavor to it, and we kind of let everybody contribute a little bit so they have some ownership. This guy looks a little bit like an old spider mine. He's got 4 legs, he's robotic, he walks around. Here's his mobile mode right here, where he walks around. He's kind of a cute little guy. But what he does, basically, he burrows into the ground, and then he pops up his pad on top, and a huge energy shield comes out, or energy shockwave, basically, and just decimates anything. So Zerg players are going to hate this guy. And again, all these animations and everything are very in flux. My favorite race, the Protoss. There you go. So we did a couple interesting things. For right now, we're actually taking out the carrier and the mothership on the multiplayer side, and it's going to replace him with this guy. So he's going to be the new capital ship. Really large, huge, and you can see here another kind of rough concept, really trying to capture the sleek shapes, almost organic shapes of the Protoss. And you can see on the top, it kind of shows a little bit of the weapon system, which is important because, as you see here in the final model, like that energy ball is huge. It really becomes part of the ship itself with the silhouette. It basically launches that thing out and takes out, massive mutas. This guy has an interesting history too, because he started off as a Dark Templar theme, so he had more of the silver and green colors, and we're trying to balance out the armies just visually. And then, we decided, hey, screw it, he's going back to typical Protoss, traditional gold colors. And often that happens during development. We'll switch back and forth, test different things out. Here you can see him totally decimate a whole bunch of mutas. Yeah, I love this guy. Now here's another old development video. This guy back in the day was called the Star Relic, and it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And we just wanted something cool. We didn't know exactly what it did. Just, hey, awesome, robotic, techno-magical looking Protoss thing. And there was no role for it basically in the Army. So every time the designers would be like, hey, we're going to put in this flyer or this caster, I'd be like, oh, dude, come on, use this, and I'd pull it back out every time. It was almost like a joke. And so finally, there is a role for it as a caster in the Heart of the Swarm expansion. And so here's the final model, again, looking much better. And it's interesting, this guy actually started off with the gold colors at first, and once we switched the Tempest over back to gold, we said, well, we got to have one Dark Templar new unit in there, so we switched this guy over to silver. And I'd like to say we spent a lot of time thinking about it, and it was this huge deliberation, and we're very smart about it, but it took about 5 minutes, and we're like, yeah, that looks cool, ship it. So this guy's really fun. He's actually kind of a harassment unit with these cool spells. Like, he can put shields on your minerals so you can't mine, so that's going to be pretty evil. Here we go, the Replicant. This guy's awesome. Again, talking about a very unique silhouette and structure. He goes around the battlefield. He just, it's a robotic unit, so we don't have to worry too much about the cockpit or seating in it or like how it all works. I mean, we try and be somewhat, form follows function, but this guy just looks cool. We're like, screw it, he looks cool, put him in there. Basically, his role is he'll take any other unit he sees on the battlefield and turn into it. So like right here, you can see him stealing the identity of the siege tanks, and he's a permanent siege tank now. So that means the Protoss players can now have any other unit that's on any other race, which is very crazy. But I love that. Cool, well now I'm going to turn you over to Steve Provost to talk about environments.
Hi, I'm Steve Provost, a 3D artist on StarCraft 2. I'm going to show you a few videos of some of the new tile sets that we're working on, and then talk about some of the philosophies that we had going into this project. So here is a new installation in Heart of the Swarm. We really wanted them to feel unique from those in Wings of Liberty. So most of the environments in Wings of Liberty have a lot of dirt and a lot of grit in them. So what we wanted to try to do with this one was make a cleaner environment. But you lose a lot of detail on the surface when you take away that dirt. So what we decided to do was add reflective environment mapping to add that missing detail. And it really makes the surfaces shine. Here's a new lava tile set. We really wanted the Terran elements in this tile set to feel rooted to the ground in such a way that it could survive this hostile environment with all the flames and the lava. And you can see some smaller frequency details and small models around the edges. It makes it look a little more alive and occupied by the Terran. There's also a new set of custom walls there with ramps as well. And those are pathable by some of the smaller units of the game. So those are completely modular, and modders are going to have a good time making interesting mods with those. This is another man-made tile set. It's floating in the thick atmosphere of this alien planet. We added a lot of environment animations, a lot of construction equipment and stuff to make this feel like a functional base for the Terran. We also added some really massive cannons there in the background. It makes it look a little more defended and kind of shows off the scale of this massive base. And all of the art in Heart of the Swarm is brand new. We really used very few assets from Wings of Liberty. So I think the overall quality of the art has increased dramatically. Okay, here's a new ice tile set for Heart of the Swarm. Sammy, our art director, really wanted to add a cool ice tile set for the fans. And so we spent a lot of time doing different iteration on ice and different styles and shapes and different shaders. And one of our artists came up with a really cool model, which was blue, cyan, and purple. And we really liked it, so we applied it to all the assets on the stage. But it was a little too saturated, so we decided to dial it back and add some environment mapping on it. And it really brought it into the StarCraft universe and gave it that crisp look that you see today. Okay, so one of the most notable improvements to the art in Heart of the Swarm is our distinct color palettes per tile set. In Wings of Liberty, we would make a lot of assets that would be used across different tile sets. And so if you saw pipes on Braxis Alpha, you would see the same exact pipes on Valhalla. But in Heart of the Swarm, we made every asset handcrafted for that tile set. So it really gives that crisp color scheme. It makes it unique for each environment. So every single world feels like a new experience, and it really gives a specific mood to the player. So while we're working on these assets, our technical artists and our graphics programmers are working hard at giving us new tools and new technology to make more versatile shaders. And so when we need a new material like clean Terran paneling or Protoss glass or Protoss pipes, we'll do a bunch of tests and decide what looks really good and apply that to all the assets on the stage. And it makes these stages look more unique and feel more original to the user. So one of the biggest hurdles we have in doing environment art for RTS games is the procedural generation of cliffs and terrain. So we don't want the terrain, the cliffs, and the environment assets to look like different elements. We want them to feel less modular and feel more like one solid piece of artwork. So we made a conscious effort to create these custom cliff models to sort of make the world look a lot more natural and feel like one piece of art. So here's one of the more larger assets that you're going to encounter in the campaign. This was actually modeled as a high poly model and then baked down to a low poly mesh that you're going to see in game. It's got a bunch of really cool shapes and some fun effects on it. So here's the rock towers, the collapsible rock towers that you're going to encounter in multiplayer. We made all of our rocks in Heart of the Swarm as high poly meshes. We sculpted them and then baked them down to the low poly mesh that you see in game. And this gave a bunch of advantages. Number one, we can make these rocks look much more rigid, and since they have unique UVs, we can actually bake in the highlights and the shadows into each rock, so you don't lose any detail when it goes into the shadow, like you do with some of the rocks in Wings of Liberty. Here's a large Protoss structure that you're going to encounter in the campaign, and the effects in this asset actually would not have been possible without the new tech that we got for Heart of the Swarm. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Dominic, and he's going to talk about some of the new improvements to the engine.
Hello, Blizzcon. I'm Dominic Filion. I'm a lead software engineer for the graphics team on StarCraft 2. And what I want to share with you today is how the graphics in StarCraft 2 has actually evolved over time. Now, does anybody in the audience remember seeing screenshots of the first StarCraft in the alpha version? Anyone? Yeah. So if you remember, we got some of those here. Back in those days, everybody hated that. That was the left side picture, right? So everybody hated the picture, and we had to go back and actually change the look of it and actually make it look much better. So you might be wondering, did we go through the same process with StarCraft 2? And yes, we did indeed. So what I've been doing is for the past 6 years, I've been secretly stashing old builds of the game on my personal computer just for this day. And today, for the first time, I'm going to show you very old footage of how StarCraft 2 came about and how it looked in the early beginnings. So let's go back to the archives and see what that looks like. So we're going to go back a few months after I started working at Blizzard, and that was June 2005. This was build 385. This was the intro screen. And what you'll see is actually a little bit embarrassing because it's pretty primitive. So we started with the StarCraft 1 units. We didn't have any new units. This was the early versions of the models. The UI obviously needed a bit of alignment work to actually get it properly working. And we didn't have a sound engine yet, so no sound in the video. So all we did at that point was just getting the old StarCraft 1 stuff actually working. And the explosions were absolutely awesome. So if we move a bit further off, that was a year later, 2006. So now we actually put in something that would look more like a genuine model of the game. We had a cliff system that was put in, some basic lighting. We were kind of experimenting with the Terrans at this point. I think, let's see, what did we have? We were putting in some new units, if we're going to see in a few minutes. Yeah, it's not there, but we put in the particle systems, which would allow us to show actual blood coming out of moves and all that kind of stuff. So that was our first version of that. And then this was a couple months later. So this is when we actually started putting in new units. And some of the units you'll see today have actually been either heavily modified or they're actually gone from the game. So there's the Guardian in there, there's the Cobra that has changed, the Thor was much bigger back then. So we put in some special effects and some beams at that point, and the explosions were actually a little bit improved. At that point, where were we? I think, oh yeah, we started working on the Protoss, the early version of the pylon energy grid we put in. We had our first experiments. You can see some Dragoons that were still in the game back then. The Purifier, which is one of the units that we subsequently killed. And this is what Creep looks like when you put a bunch of programmers in a room without an artist to actually give them direction. But we had our first version of the Creep at a prototype stage at this point. Moving on, 2006 in October, this is when we put in the glow tech in the game and the high dynamic range colors. So we started putting beams as well and all sorts of cool effects and actually getting something that looks a lot closer to what we have today. What you see here is actually the old Archon, which was much bigger, and you could actually spawn it by just merging 3 Templars together. This is the mechanic we subsequently changed. So this is an actual much closer version of the Creep that we actually put in later. If you look in the video, you'll see it was actually reflective. This is something we changed afterwards because it was kind of slow. The Creep was pretty slow, and it was kind of distracting to actually see twice the same unit on the same screen. But at that point, we had really started to dial down the look of the Zerg and the Theron and the Protoss, and actually getting something that looks a lot closer to what we have today. Does anybody remember seeing the announcement of StarCraft 2 in Korea, like the early videos? This is the build that we use, and this was the first time we showed it to public. Blizzard actually shipped the whole team to Korea, and we had this huge stadium to actually see how the people would receive the game. It was the most exciting moment of my life, really. This is July 2007. We put in foliage on the terrain, as you can see, so we were starting to really polish up the maps and actually give them a more finished look. This is when we put in the line of sight blockers, the first time we experimented with that mechanic. And then a few months later, October 2007, we put in scorch marks underneath buildings, kind of little polish items to really kind of anchor buildings to the terrain and actually give the final look for buildings. So at that point, we were actually quite close to the look of the game that we have today. But this was 2007, so you're probably wondering what the hell have these guys been doing in just 3 years between shipping. Well, we optimized the game, and we fixed some bugs, and we worked on the single-player campaign. That was 2008. And then in 2009, we optimized the game some more, and we fixed more bugs, and we worked on the campaign some more, until 12,000 builds later, we shipped version 1 of StarCraft that we have today. So let's move on to Swarm. Anyone here play on the lowest quality setting for graphics in StarCraft 2? Yeah, I hate you guys. So we're gonna improve that. It looks terrible. It looks terrible on low, but we're actually gonna improve that and not make it any slower than it is. We're actually trying to make that, and pro players love playing on low, so we're gonna actually focus on that. How many Zerg players do we have here today? So for you Creep lovers, we're going to actually improve the look of the Creep quite a bit. So as you can see, the Creep is actually growing on the buildings of your enemy, so you can actually infest his buildings and really show him you're really corrupting the heart of his base. Another thing we're going to be working on, there's a lot of units in the Zerg race that have snake-like movements. So we've built this animation system that will automatically generate all these snake movements. This is something the modders could use if you want to make your own train of Marines or whatever that looks like a snake. We also have rebuilt the physics engine from scratch. So now you can humiliate your enemy in a lot of various ways. In slow-mo, nice. So modders could also use the physics to do whatever they need. If, for example, you want to make a marine rain spell.
It's raining men.
So these are just some of the new features we're going to put in Swarm for you guys, and I really hope you enjoy them. Thanks.
Just give it all to me. Hi guys, I'm Phil Gonzalez, and I'm going to talk to you guys about what we've been doing on StarCraft Dota, or Blizzard Dota, I should say.
Fired.
Blizzard Dota is a lot of Hey. Blizzard Dota is a lot of fun for us because we focused on the military campaigns of StarCraft 2, and we were really focused on having large armies, massive amounts of units, and we weren't focused on heroes. So Blizzard Dota gives us the opportunity to shift that focus and actually play around on the other end of the spectrum, where we have really cool, polished hero characters, among other things. One of the things we're trying out, and you'll know there's a difference between the map from last year and this year, is that we're playing around with the cyber world idea. And the main idea is that this world is a gaming planet, and all the heroes are being abducted or incorporated to provide entertainment. The world we're trying to experiment with will also have a replication of terrain and areas we're familiar with, so maybe we'll see Sanctuary and other worlds from Blizzard universes. Another thing we changed from last year was the creeps. These guys are the numerous minions you'll be fighting as your heroes. We really wanted to imply a simplicity in their design. They're mass-produced, they're pieces of junk, you're going to kill them by the thousands, so who cares how intricate they are. Basically, we use really simple shapes, circles, pipes, stuff like that. We carried this theme on through some of the Mega Minions. This is going to replace the minion that we currently have, which I think is an Ultralisk in the Blizzcon build. But this will be there in that place, and it shares some of the same elements. It still looks like it's mass-produced, it's a simple thing to build, but it's also been kind of overbuilt in some areas to imply that this thing is going to wreck house. Take it out. Basically, the main goal with the minions is that they're kind of unremarkable. We want the heroes to be the focus of the game. We want the minions to be completely expendable. So going through with the cyber world theme, our main focus of Blizzard Dota is making the heroes shine and everything else just complement their goal in what you're doing in the game. Another interesting aspect of the cyber world is that we're going to be blending Blizzard worlds into it. For this build, we decided to bring in the ogres from the World of Warcraft universe. And so we have the mercenaries who have taken very quickly to the technology of the future, and they've equipped themselves with guns, armor, and the concept on the right, you'll see, is the Ogre King. It's not ready for BlizzCon yet, but he essentially is a gold piñata. If you find him on the map, kick the crap out of him, he's going to drop a ton of gold, and it's all going to go to your entire team. It's a cool new guy. These are the models we use for the Ogre minions. The cool thing about them is they're really economic models. We essentially made one ogre, and by switching out the weapons between ranged or melee weapons, we can get a lot more variety and utility out of these models. Another benefit is we have custom textures for each of these, and the textures make distinct differences on the models, such as tattoo patterns or even the completely different skin tone on the Ogre Mage. This is just a quick example movie, and if you're in the last panel you saw, the way the ogres work is they have camps around the map, and when you defeat them, they'll swear allegiance to your team, essentially replacing some of the mass-produced minions with sturdier, more honed fighters that will actually fight for you. It's pretty cool. And it takes a while. Just keep watching.
It's hammer time.
Man. This is the Goblin Shop. We knew that we were going to be redoing the item shop, and we decided what would be a good fit for an item merchant. Naturally, the goblins came to mind once again. They're prolific, they'll pop up anywhere, they're like cockroaches or whatever. So basically, they've taken over the cyber world's merchant needs, and they haven't really adapted that much. It's still the same shoddy goblin construction we know and love. It's a fun piece, and it really adds a lot of flavor to the serious tone of the cyber world. This is a concept for Lord Order. When we showed Blizzard Dota last year, instead of Lord Order, we had a King Tower as the final objective. We decided we could add a lot more character to the game by adding Lord Order, implying he's more of a galactic overlord and that he's part of the acclamation of the heroes that are fighting. We wanted to give him really powerful, sweeping kingly gestures to imply that this guy is badass until he gets beaten up by 5 heroes. When we started developing Blizzard Dota, we started with things we already had. Kerrigan was an ideal candidate. She appeared in Wings of Liberty, and she essentially already had every function we needed to start making heroes. We just simply adapted her by giving her more team color so she had a better read from the game view camera. We also started experimenting. The Dwarven Marauder is an ideal situation where we decided we could blend the Warcraft and the StarCraft universe into this character. The Marauder proportions are really close to Dwarven proportions, and by adding weapons, the spears on the back and the helmet, we got a really interesting character that we blended up. And we're definitely going to try experimenting in appropriate places with this more often. Nova is a key example of something the designers were really interested in because they wanted to see a ghost character. They had a lot of ghost abilities already implemented, and they said, we're going to use a ghost. And as artists, we asked if we could implement something a bit more visually pleasing than the standard ghost we have in the Terran army. And you'll see in some other slides, we would like to use iconic characters whenever possible, even if we're defining a hero by a basic role. Tassadar is kind of an ideal example of this. The initial build of Tassadar, he was a sentry, just a regular old robotic sentry. Not that cool to look at, and we definitely liked the Protoss vibe. We thought, it feels Protoss-like, so let's pick a better Protoss character to represent it. Luckily, we had Tassadar from Wings of Liberty, and all we had to do really was make a new crest on his back to kind of make him look more epic. So now we have a new hero, Uther. Uther was another hero that design had established early on that they wanted a healing class. They really wanted a healing-centric character, and through discussions, it seemed like the Paladin kit would be fitting best for him, and it's kind of appropriate that the first Paladin character in the Warcraft lore is also the first Paladin in StarCraft Dota, representing the healing classes. Arthas, on the other hand, was a different story. Arthas is awesome. Like, let's just put him in the game. That's what we said, and they had no idea what they were going to do. There was no design agenda for a Death Knight, but the art was there, and the art had a lot of potential. So, in a kind of backwards fashion, the art came first, and then design decided to make some really cool Death Knight-centric abilities to make Arthas work. Thrall, once again, shifts over where they had a shaman character type. They said, we want to use Bloodlust, we want to use Totems, we want to use Lightning Shield. Naturally, we decided, let's use our most well-known shaman character, and we picked Thrall. When we picked Thrall, though, we already had a character that was an orc, the Blade Master. And so we decided to make Thrall a bit more distinct and change his silhouette by mounting him on a Cyberwolf. The Cyberwolf and Thrall initially were the same thing. Thrall was just mounted on a wolf. He didn't move faster. There was no gameplay functionality behind him being on a wolf. This was interesting. It's a different physical read. It's a different silhouette. It's unique. Unfortunately, what we discovered, and we learned this lesson a long time ago as well, and it came back, is that when you create a character on a mount, you have to scale it down. It says the character on the mount has to have the same pathing footprint and take up the same area as a character on foot. The bummer is Thrall becomes very small. He doesn't look epic anymore. He doesn't look like a war chief. It doesn't feel like Thrall. Why should we use Thrall? We had this problem in Warcraft 3 as well. It essentially came back to haunt us, and we really had concerns about this. We wanted it to look epic. So we discussed with the designers and voiced these concerns. We asked if the mount system could be better integrated into the game. They had already had things they were talking about with the boots, and they decided, well, maybe we can take boots out of the game, and we can make the mount an actual part of the game design. And that's kind of how it came around, is we wanted to see Thrall looking his best mounted, and we wanted the mount to have more significance. And this is kind of the best of both worlds, because now we have Thrall mounted up. The mount actually signifies the fact that he'll be moving faster and has a role, and plus we can dismount Thrall, and he looks just as cool stomping around smashing heads. Finally, we have the D3 Witch Doctor. I was really, really excited to see this character get put in the game, because this is the first time we've incorporated Diablo universe characters into Blizzard Dota. And this guy has a bit more of a subtle blending of universes. You can see he has a troll witch doctor head as his familiar totem, as well as a Zergling skull on the back of his hip. We're really looking forward to mixing these universes more. There's a lot of potential here. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is a character that we have in the works right now. It's a Goblin Tinker. The Goblin Tinker is going to be a construction-based hero. He's going to build all sorts of turrets and launch pads, stuff like that. His ultimate ability is his armor. He jumps inside of it and it becomes a Goblin-style marine suit. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're basically making a Goblin SCV, and we'll see how it plays out. We're also looking into hero skins, hero variations. All the heroes we had last year, they're coming back. We just wanted a smaller amount of heroes for Blizzcon. But you can guarantee that we're going to explore things like alternate costumes, putting Stitches in a marine armor instead of a Zerg carapace suit. Things like that. We're still deciding what we're going to do, but there's a lot of potential here. For example, we can make any of these characters. Or any of these characters. The sky's really the limit. I mean, I don't know what we're going to end up doing, but there's a ton of really cool universe characters that we can pick and really make Blizzard Dota unique. Finally, sadly, this model was not prepared for BlizzCon. Stupid, I know. But Illidan is really, really cool, and he's on deck right now. They're concepting out his hero kit, and you can see from the animations coming up, he's going to be a really, really fun hero, and it's going to be cool seeing him and Arthas square off. So thank you for your time, Blizzard Convention. I guess we're going to Q&A.